Hello, BookTube. I'm coming to you with another shelf tour, but not poetry today. I said yesterday I was going to continue with poetry. I had, at that time, intended to, but I miscalculated how much I have left and where everything is sort of located, and some of it is still very difficult to get to. It's getting warmer, and I'm just sort of pouring with sweat trying to reach stuff. Because it's like 20-some degrees outside Celsius, but it's like 5 or 6 degrees warmer in here, so I need a fan on. So I do apologize for the sound, but it's not even doing much. But yeah, so I thought, well, maybe I will continue or not, and then I heard from a few of my followers and a friend of mine thinking that I should switch it up a little bit, and I thought, well, okay, yep, fair enough, I will. So here we go. With more books, but books about books. We'll see how far we get. I've already tried this, and I ran out of memory, so I might have to split this up in two. My books about books are fairly well organized, or at least for the most part. I start out, I want to change it up a little bit, but they start out with printing history, then it goes into typography, then it goes into sort of the history of the book and how the book is made, binding, and so forth. But that's where I actually want to switch it a little bit and have the history of the book and then the binding and so forth, then moving into the printing and then typography. And then after that, it's sort of the illustrators, engravers, and that type of thing. And there's a smattering of other stuff, like I've got the history of writing, which should go next to the typography or before the typography. You see, this is where I'm hoping to refine it a little bit here. And then I go into libraries, history of libraries, and then and then personal libraries. But in between that, I do sort of, there's a history of reading that I have a few books of. And then we go into, I think after the private libraries, is sort of collecting, the collecting mania. And then booksellers. And then there's a section on children's books. And then it sort of goes for more sort of specific to, earlier, and then periods of studies of periods of books, like medieval, ancient, or whatever, right up to modern times in the history of literature. It continues on the way down. But anyway, don't get too pedantic here, because I'm going to be refining it as we go along, and you'll see sort of the method that I had, which I'm refining here. This is printing, so it starts out with printing. It's a nondescript book, but I thought I'd just get it out of the way. It's printing style. It's basically for authors, compositors, and readers. James Jarrett, George Allen, and Unwin, 1960. Nothing special about it. It's almost like the Oxford style guide, but it tells you what to do with sort of, with a hyphen, how you put a hyphen in, and how the printer should do it as well. So that's the interesting thing about this. It's not just a style, it tells how the printer does it as well. So that makes it of interest. And it was a free book anyway, so I'm not going to complain there. This is a really good history, or at least, I thought it was a very good history of printing. It's the 500 Years of Printing by S.H. Steinberg. This is a Pelican book. A friend picked this up for me a number of years ago. Very interesting, and published in Penguin in 61, originally 55. There's a lot of dust here coming off these books, so I'm coughing and my nose is itching, my eyes are watering. Could also be allergies starting because it's getting warmer. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, so I thought that was very good. And then I found a hardcover of it. So I got a hardcover. Oh, jeez. And there is, somebody's tipped into a back cover on the attached end paper, probably the front panel by the looks of it, of the dust jacket. So don't have the dust jacket, but I've got the front panel of it. Let me move the camera over a little bit. Need to make some space here for the books. Here is another good one, Printing in London, From Caxton to Modern Times by P.M. Handover. Short, so it's very cursory, but it's quite interesting. It gives an overview, published in 1960. by George Allen and Unwin. And yeah, it's quite well illustrated. Great frontispiece of Bishop's Bible, printed by Christopher Barker. And it gives some type, the jobbing, it's called. Yeah, the subtitle sort of is Competitive Practice and Technical Invention in the Trade of Book and Bible Printing, Periodical Printing, and Jobbing, etc. So that was quite good. This one's interesting. I've got 2 copies of it, sort of. This is a student's edition, 4 Centuries of Fine Printing, by Stanley Morrison, Ernest Benn and Company. This is a student's edition, and yeah, Ernest Benn. It was originally published in 400 limited copies in 24, and then a second revised edition in 1949. This is the 4th revised reset edition, 1960. And it's got an introduction that's just over about 50 pages long, and then it goes into the plates of facsimiles, and it's literally just page after page of facsimile of pages of books. And so it says 172, I think, 192. It's an ex-library copy. I paid next to nothing for it. It's water damaged. I think I will keep this even so, because the full edition is actually 272 specimens of the work of presses established, blah, blah, blah. And this is the 1949 edition that mentions. But I think I'll keep both, because they are different editions, especially with the difference of plates, and I don't know if anything has changed. I have not compared to plate by plate to see. So before I get rid of it, I would need to do that if I really wanted to think about getting rid of it. Here's a remainder that I bought. It's a monograph from Oxford University Press. It's called Reforming Printing, Sion Abbey's Defense of Orthodoxy, 1525 to 1534, by Alexandra da Costa, published in 2012. I've not read it. As I say, it's an academic work, but I just haven't got around to reading it. I bought it cheaply as a remainder from a remainder house, and it says on the back panel of the jacket, this book investigates how Sion Abbey responded to the religious turbulence of the 1520s, 1530s. It examines the 11 books that 3 of the Bridgetine brothers, William Bond, John Feuderer, and Richard Whitford, had printed during this period, and argues that the order used vernacular printing to engage with religious and political developments that threatened their understanding of Orthodox faith. So it sounds interesting, but I haven't got to yet. Now, when I was reading that 500 Years one, there's 2 books that I referred to while I was reading and read bits of it, so I haven't read this fully. It is A History of European Printing by Colin Clare. It's published in 1976 by Academic Press, London, New York, San Francisco. Now, there is a 4-volume history, and I'm not sure if it's Colin Clare, but there's a 4-volume history of printing which I'd like to get, which looks pretty good. It's not that new, but I think there's some newer ones too that would be nice as well, but the price is astronomical. But anyway, yeah, this one, it was quite interesting because it's easy to dip into the chapters, because it's got like early printing in France, Switzerland's first printers, printing comes to England, Eastern Europe, Russia, and Poland, early printing in Scandinavia, evolution of printing in Central. You get the picture that you can look in very easily into, even without even looking at the index, if you wanted to read a section of the area. And that's what I did. After reading a bit of that, I jumped to this, and then I went to this one as well. This is This is a bigger book, History of Printing, its development through 500 years, by John Clyde Oswald. So it covers the same, more or less, period. Well, it does cover the period of the one that I had read cover to cover. It's got a nice illuminated facsimile of first page of Cicero's Officia et Paradoxia by Faust and Schiffer, Mainz, in 1466, one of the first printed editions of a classic. It's quite nice. But this one here, yeah, is New York, Appleton, D. Appleton and Company, 1928, and it's well illustrated as well. But it's on the same lines as the other one for chapter headings, where you could jump immediately to first printers of Italy, the early printers of Venice, the early printers of Cologne, and so on and so on. You can easily jump to. This one's kind of neat. It's a London Lithographic Printers, 1800 to 1850, Twyman. It's without a jacket, but I don't know if this ever did have a jacket, because a lot of these little societies don't. But it's the Printing Historical Society that's published it, compiled by Michael Twyman. It's 1800, a Directory of London Lithographic Printers, 1800 to 1850. Now, that it's got a bit of an introduction, and then it lists the lithographers with their addresses and dates, which is very interesting. What I'll use it for, I'm not sure, but it was really cheap. See, this is a bit out of order here, because that should go with my lithography and etching books and stuff like this, even though it's printers. But that's where it should, the printing should it should slip with that, or maybe even change it a little bit. I'm working on the order, and I'm going to refine it. Here's a Dictionary of Booksellers and Printers, 1726 to 1775, and it's published by the printed for the Bibliographical Society at the Oxford University Press. It's 1932, but it's printed for the year 1930. And it's, Dictionary of Printers and Booksellers who were at work in England, Scotland, and Ireland from 1726 to 1775. The compiler for England was H.R. Palmer, and Scotland by G.H. Bushnell, and Ireland by E.R. McDix. And somebody's making a lot of noise outside. And if we look under S for England, we find an R. Standfast, bookseller in Westminster, Westminster Hall, 1726. And then it says C Dictionary, 1668 to 1725, the previous volume to this, which I don't have. Still in business in 1726, when he published Paragon Juris Canonicae Anglicanae. And so there it is there. I have no doubt it'll be some sort of ancestor of mine, because there weren't that many standfasts around, especially after the Battle of Hastings, or the centuries after that. There were a lot beheaded for treason, or changed their name in one form or another. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting. It again is a listing of them in the years. Printer in London, Little Britain. Oh, there you go. Little Britain was around early. Anyway. So yeah, and then that is Century of English. This one's a Century of English Book Trade. It's short notices of all printers, stationers, bookbinders, and others connected with it from the issue of the first dated book in 1457 to the incorporation of the Company of Stationers in 1557 by E. Gordon Duff, Bibliographical Society, 1948. And it hasn't even been opened, so I haven't read it yet. I picked it up cheap, and it's just this listing of the printers and bookbinders and so forth. And again, that should probably go near the end, and I'll have to get that to go into the lithography and things like that, the printing. But at the moment, what follows is typography. This is a book that doesn't fit on the shelf, but I'll show it anyway. If I can hold it far enough back. There's a normal sort of size book, so you can see how much bigger it is. This is an atlas of type forms. That's exactly what it is. It is basically folio size. James Sutton and Alan Bartram. It's a Wordsworth edition. Nothing spectacular about it, but it's 1988 edition, originally published in 1968. So it's a unique record of 5 centuries of metal type. Since the original publication, the whole process of creating type has changed. So yeah, so there you go. A big book on typography. Stuff that down there. Here's another one that should be with the other one. To see again, it's out of order a little bit. Authors and Printers Dictionary by F. Howard Collins. Again, it's like that other one where it says how certain things should be written. Like short forms, sort of Fahrenheit temperature scale, abbreviation, capital F period or FAHR period, and things like that. It's a little dictionary, which is kind of interesting as well because it's for the printers. That's the interesting part. More typography, like the rest here is going to be typography. Here is a remainder book I haven't got to yet. I haven't actually looked too closely at it. I haven't even cracked the cover yet. It's Shady Characters, The Secret Life of Punctuation Symbols and Other Typographical Marks by Keith Houston, W.W. Norton Company, 2013. Another remainder, which I found quite interesting, Type, The Secret History of Letters, Simon Loxley, by Abbey, 2004. Nothing sort of groundbreaking in it, but it's a general overview, so it was quite interesting. Here's one that's quite interesting as well. They're all quite interesting. Type Principles and Application. It's sort of privately printed, and it's the house style of Balding and Mansell printers, with some photographs taken at their plant, Parkworks, Wisebeach, Cambridgeshire. And so you got the photographs of the printing works, and there you go. So yeah, so again, this should be sort of, it's typeface, but it's like the printer, so it should sort of move into, I should actually start with, because I've got some books on writing and things like that, that's where it should start. Then move into the typefacing, and then as you get more, when it's talking about the printers, moving into the printers, and then into the engravers. That's the order that I want to actually do it. Here's an introduction to the history of printing types. It's a quite nice one. I have not read it from cover to cover. Nice end papers. It is an introduction to the history of printing types, an illustrated summary of main stages in the development of type design from 1440 up to the present day, to aid in typeface identification by Geoffrey Dowding, Wallace and Company, Limited, 1961. And it's just chock full of typefaces again. And with a lot of text as well, but some, it's all black and white. That's the downside of it. Yeah, and just the black type. How to Plan Print by John Charles Tarr. So this is for the printer. It's how you plan, how you set it out. He's John Charles Tarr is consultant typographer, late chief instructor in typography at the Twickenham Technical Institute, Typographic Technical Staff, the Monotype Corporation Limited. And this is Crosby, Lockwood and Son, London, second edition, revised 1949. And yeah, it's got a lot of illustrations, and it's basically how to go to plan out the typography of the page of printing, and what can be used, and what you have and what can be used. So we'll end it at with the rest of the typography here. Type in Action, and that is by Herbert Jones, Sedgwick and Jackson Limited. It's a jacket's in really rough shape. This is first printed in 1938. Just again a little monograph sort of on types. It's got advertising cards for the time, and yeah, see, it's quite interesting. We got two more books here. Can't read that one because it's backwards. A handbook of printing types with, by the looks of it, the original receipt in there, which is kind of cool. It's got belongs to an Anthony Frederick Walker book plate, and it's nice pictorial boards which mirrors the jacket, which is still here. This is, handbook of printing types with notes on the style and composition and graphic processes used by Cowles. So the specific one, W.S. Cowles Limited, Butler Market, Ipswich, distributed by Faber and Faber. This book has been designed, written in John W. 1947. Somebody's wrote in pencil, text set by, can't read that, sorry. But yeah, it just goes through the typeface. It does have some colored pictures in it. Nothing special, but it's got all the different typefaces by Cowles. It's got an errata slip in it, Times New Roman, some other printing, and I'm just rushing here to finish. Type for Books, a design manual. So this is a manual by McKay's of Chatham, and published in 1959. Alphabets and Flowers for complete index of flowers, see page 52. But yeah, it's just literally page after page of styles, and as it says, it's who's compiled it here? Does it say it just says Designer's Manual, McKay's of Chatham, so it's done by the company McKay and Company, distributed by the Bodley Head. So yeah, so there ends the typography. I'll be back later to finish the shelf off with sort of the history of books. It's just a small section. But take care, BookTube. Bye.